It is 7 p.m. West African time, and you are welcome to the webinar of the Nigerian Academy of Medicine, where we are going to listen today to our guest speaker. But to moderate this event today is our chairman, who ordinarily does not need introduction once we hear the name, Professor Idris Muhammed, who is a professor of medicine and infection and immunology at Gombe State University. He was a professor for long. If you realize he graduated MBBS in 1969, after which he has worked in UK in immunology, and he has worked in Medical Research Council, working on immune complexes in diseases which earned him the MD in immunology. For the recognition of his outstanding contributions to medicine, he was conferred with Nigeria's highest academic and professional honor, the Nigerian National Order of Merit, NNOM, in 2007. So our chairman today is Professor Idris Muhammed, FAAS, NNOM, FNAMed, a foundation member of this academy. Professor, please carry on, sir, and introduce the speaker.
Thank you very much, Atoebi, Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Medicine. It's my pleasure to introduce the guest speaker today, who is Professor Richard Adegbola, FAAS, who has made outstanding contributions to global health for more than 3 decades. He trained as a microbiologist in Nigeria and the UK, attaining his PhD in medical microbiology from the University of Dundee. He's an independent consultant in immunization and global health at Rambicon, a global health consulting company in Lagos. He's currently a consultant and research professor at the Nigeria Institute of Medical Research. His previous roles include Global Director of Scientific Affairs and Public Health at GlaxoSmithKline Vaccines in Belgium, a senior program officer leading pneumonia clinical studies at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle, USA. He was also head of bacterial diseases research program at the UK Medical Research Council unit in the Gambia, and also a senior lecturer and head of microbiology unit at Lagos State University, a medical laboratory scientist in microbiology at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Professor Adegbola has worked in diagnostic microbiology, academia, philanthropy, and pharmaceutical industry across 3 continents, gaining unique and varied experience in the process. His scientific endeavors are of the highest international standard and of great relevance to developing countries of Africa. The impact of his work in Haemophilus influenza type B, HIP, and pneumococcal disease, as well as vaccines, are well known, as he is well recognized in the field. His work has saved many lives, and he has worked in routine immunization programs in Africa that saved many, many more lives. Professor Adegbola is a fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists, an honorary fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of London, a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Science and the African Academy of Sciences. He's a member of the FAAS WHO meningitis vaccine project scientific advisory group, in which I had the pleasure of working with him to produce MenAfriVac, the conjugate meningitis vaccine that has virtually eliminated epidemics of the disease in the African meningitis belt. He was appointed recently as a trustee of the Sabin Institute, Washington, DC, and a member of the World Health Organization Afro-Regional Immunization Technical Advisory Group, RITAG. He has written extensively, co-authoring 247 publications in peer-reviewed journals, attracting 33,948 reads and 18,806 citations, according to ResearchGate. He has an H index of 67. And I just wonder how many people in Africa have that kind of H index. Professor Adegbola is probably not aware of what I'm about to say on him now. During an international conference on meningitis at the Royal Society, yes, the Royal Society, the mother of all Royal Societies, not the Royal Society of Physicians or Pathologists or of anything, but the Royal Society. There was an international conference several years ago where he was due to present a paper, but he was nowhere to be found. The concern and virtual commotion generated was almost palpable. The organizer of the conference, Professor Sir Brian Greenwood, paced up and down and out and in from the room, checking to see if Richard was somewhat lost. And eventually, after a suspension of many minutes, it was decided that his presentation must be given anytime he arrived because of its importance. As a Nigerian, I was moved, overtaken by emotion, and deeply proud. It is therefore with immense pleasure that I invite Professor Richard Adegbola to kick off this webinar by presenting his perspectives on local production of vaccines in Nigeria, from research and development to manufacturing. Professor Adegbola, you're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, sir. I think before actually sharing my slides, I'd like to actually just acknowledge you, sir, and to thank you for that kind and generous introduction. And for bringing to my knowledge what happened that day, because I think I got lost in traffic. But yeah, I managed to get there eventually. But I should also like to thank the eminent persons in the Nigerian Academy of Medicine for inviting me to be the guest speaker today. I count that as a huge honor, because as you know, I'm not a member of the Nigerian Academy of Medicine. To have asked me to do this means that you have some trust in me that I will be able to deliver. I hope I'll be able to do so tonight. But actually acknowledge you, and I'm thankful. So all protocols observed, sir. So I'm now going to share my slide to begin my talk. Okay, so I think I'm going to move this. I'm trying to. So the topic that I'll be speaking to in another 40 minutes or so is local production of vaccines in Nigeria, from research and development to manufacturing. And I think with great respect, you could not have chosen a better topic because this is a very topical issue because of the pandemic and the associated implications that we have witnessed in the past 2 years or so. Oh, I can't move my slide. Okay, and so this is what I plan to cover, and it's to start with global inequity in COVID-19 vaccine distribution, to ask a question. Is this a wake-up call for us now in Africa, and particularly for us in Nigeria? And to talk about history of vaccine production in Nigeria, that's actually we've been producing a vaccine in Nigeria in the past. I will look at, to illustrate the issues that we are facing, I will then go into issues regarding vaccine R&D and the manufacturing of vaccines. What are the implications and the steps that are involved? The regulatory review, And how can we turn the challenges that I will bring out in these topics to opportunities for vaccine production in Nigeria, and then do a forward look. So look at global inequity in COVID-19 vaccine distribution. Graphically, if we look at what is going on now, it looks like this. There's vaccine everywhere, as it were, except in Africa. But even prior to COVID and the pandemic, while Africa consumes a whopping 25% of global vaccine supply, Africa produces only 1% of vaccines administered on the continent. That's an embarrassment, actually, because then where can be our security if this is what is happening in terms of national security? I will come home to Nigeria, and we look at the routine vaccines that are included in the expanded program on immunization schedule in Nigeria, about 11 of them or so that are contained in them. There are some vaccines that are available in Nigeria that are not included in the program because they are not yet there, but may be available on the shelf. But the question here to actually, why am I putting this slide on, is that not one of them, not one of these vaccines is actually produced in our country, in Nigeria. And in fact, the EPI vaccines are procured by government internationally for Nigeria through the support of development partners like Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and UNICEF, through some kind of arrangement where we actually share some kind of co-payment in the process. And if we come to COVID again, by February 19, look at the percentage in the many countries in the world that have received COVID-19 vaccine. And yet in our country, you see less than 10% of our population that is vaccinated. And we are probably, Nigeria probably doing better than some African countries, but I'm not sure how better that is. We are still under 10% vaccinated. And in terms of numbers, if you look at Nigeria, there is 6 from the bottom. Only about 15 million Nigerians have been vaccinated so far. And so there was this publication about only 13 countries have enough COVID-19 vaccine to vaccinate 100% of their population and all vulnerable groups worldwide. The point I wanted to illustrate here is that it does appear then that only countries that have the capability to actually produce vaccines that are getting their people vaccinated. And really, can we blame them? It's another question to ask. Because if we make our own vaccine in Nigeria, we will not vaccinate our own people? And that comes to this statement from the WHO Director General. No other event like the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that reliance on a few companies to supply global public goods, including vaccine, is limiting. And it's actually, he says, it's dangerous. And I could not agree more with him. But that's not, so clearly there's an issue here that has got us talking in Africa about vaccines and vaccine production on the continent, and of course, including our country, Nigeria. But there is history of vaccine production in Nigeria, as I mentioned earlier on. And if you look at this, I'm sure some of the elderly ones among us are familiar with these buildings, because I grew up to know them also actually at Yaba. And this was the West African Yellow Fever Commission headquarters and laboratories, where the primary aim there actually was to study the epidemiology and transmission pattern of yellow fever vaccine. And that was done. So these are very historical buildings. I think we have demolished them for now anyway. And if we look at chronologically then in Nigeria, how we came about the life attenuated approach in Chikembra after several passages of an Asibi strain. Asibi is the name of a person, actually a Ghanaian, called Gold Coast then, from whose blood was actually taken in 1927 to isolate the first virus through passage by inoculating the blood into a monkey. But if you look at actually looking at yellow fever, where I started very early in 1920 in Nigeria, on the left of the slide, when yellow fever commission was established. And so people were coming actually basically to look at some kind of surveillance for the problem and determine its pattern and how to break the chain, as it were. And what became the National Institute of Medical Research was established in 1927 through Rockefeller Foundation funding of yellow fever disease surveillance, which began then in Yaba. Yaba at that time was actually like outside of Lagos. And the first strain, as I was mentioning, was actually isolated from a 28-year-old person from Gold Coast, as it was called then, from Ghana, when his virus the blood was inoculated into a monkey from where the virus was isolated. And it became the source of the first ever vaccine that was made against yellow fever through the passage of that strain severally to arrive at an attenuated, live attenuated vaccine that was called 17D, yellow fever vaccine at NIMA in Yaba in 1952. But apart from yellow fever, other vaccines have also been actually produced in Nigeria from the National Veterinary Research Institute in Vaughan, where they made the first rabies vaccine for dog in 1956, and then for cats in 1970. But the sad news actually was that there was a stoppage of 17D yellow fever vaccine production in Nigeria in 1991. And since that time, until now as we speak, there have not been actually any small scale or large scale production of human vaccine in Nigeria. Of course, the National Veterinary Research Institute continues to produce vaccines that's used for livestock, both within Nigeria and I think in surrounding countries as well. So this is our history. We have actually produced a vaccine in Nigeria before. And I'm sure, and I know that there are some Nigerians, independent academics in the universities and research institutes that are working at identifying potential targets of vaccine candidates. But since 1991, there has not been sufficiently coordinated efforts at arriving at large-scale production of vaccine that can be used by our citizens. So what could be responsible then for the stoppage of 17D vaccine production in Nigeria? And I think your guess is probably as good as mine. I have a long list here. It could be lack or limited disease surveillance to sustain advocacy for government commitment towards yellow fever control, lacking infrastructure for local zoologic vaccine production, brain drain of expertise in vaccinology, loss of external support for local 17D vaccine production, poor funding of research and development of local vaccine, lack of political will, and feedback of communities, sometimes actually in terms of perception of local vaccine production. And of course, over-reliance on foreign vaccine donation. So what are vaccines then? I thought I should just use a couple of slides to, so what are vaccines then and what can we actually benefit from them? Vaccines are biological products which can prevent diseases that can be dangerous or even deadly. They work with our body's natural system or defense system to safely develop protection against specific diseases. Once introduced to the body, a vaccine helps our immune system to produce antibodies and cellular components such that after getting vaccinated, there is protection against that disease without having to get the disease first. Unlike most medicines which treat or cure diseases, vaccines actually prevent them. And that should be of the highest interest to us in our setting in Nigeria or Africa in general, where our healthcare system is less than optimum. Medicines sometimes are not available. So the adage that prevention is better than cure is actually should be of highest interest to us. But is it? And what about the benefits of vaccines and vaccination? And I'm trying to discriminate a little bit there. But according to WHO, with the exception of safe water, no other modality, not even antibiotics, has had such a major effect on mortality reduction. Only clean drinking water rivals vaccination in its ability to save lives. Each year, worldwide, vaccines prevent up to 2 to 3 million deaths. And we know smallpox is the only human disease that has been eradicated by vaccination in 1980. Polio is another disease that is likely to be eradicated soon. As you know, Africa was declared white polio free on 25th August 2020, following Nigeria's record of not having a case of polio, white polio, for about 3 years prior to that. Of course, there's some issues now in Malawi. And one other important point before I leave my slide, this slide, for each dollar, it's been shown that for each dollar invested in immunization, $16 are generated in economic return to the community in low and middle income countries. So this is something that should be of interest to us, given that we are a developing country. I also want to talk briefly about what is actually involved in the vaccine process itself. And I describe them as 3 pillars: research and development, manufacturing and procurement, and delivery and access. My topic doesn't cover the third one, delivery and access, but it's important because the topical thing now is we want to make vaccines. Of course we should make vaccines, but are we able to deliver them to those who need them as well? It's because it's important. Vaccines alone, no matter how good they are, they do not save lives. It's vaccination that does save life. It's the process of making sure that we prepare. So we're not only going to manufacture vaccine, which is a nice thing to do, we also have to work on our health system to make sure that when we start producing the vaccine, it actually gets to those who need them and prevent them from getting sick or dying. And what I'm going to do in the next few slides is actually describe these processes and highlight what might be the challenges that we face in them and why we are not actually readily doing that in Nigeria or elsewhere. So I'll start with vaccine R&D, which is a complex and risky journey. And this is it, actually, in a nutshell. Usually to make vaccine, because we're talking about manufacturing now, there's less talk about discovery itself, the research that we need to lead to that. And there is exploratory research in trying to identify potential targets or potential vaccine candidates. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of search, and may take years actually to arrive. It's not something that just happened overnight. I think, with due respect, Professor Tomari has been emphasizing this all the time, each time I listen to him on TV or radio, that it's not going to happen overnight because it takes time, it takes effort to identify what we eventually work. And the success rate is actually marginal. Okay, but then that's the first step. And the idea at that time is to identify something that is capable, that is showing signs of stimulating immune response, but also that is not toxic or not dangerous to the individual. And once you start getting something that can be evaluated, you move to preclinical studies, which you do in animals. So you in your laboratory studies, you cell lines if you're working with viruses, and then animals, again, to show that they are not toxic and they are generating immune responses. And it's only when you get to that stage that you move on to the clinical studies, which is actually where I get involved in these phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, that go from one step to another. Usually you move from adults to children, even if it's going to be a vaccine for children. And the key that you're trying to show there is that the vaccine or the product at that stage is safe and that is effective. That is the purpose of all these clinical trials. remember, you're going to give vaccine to healthy people, and you want to make sure that it's zero tolerance actually to mistake. And once you get to that, that large efficacy trial, phase 3, that we normally include thousands of people really, and you're still able to show a particular efficacy that's acceptable, then you are now ready for a regulatory review. Again, looking at your procedures, your methodologies, and I'm going to talk to that a bit later. Before then you start manufacturing. The important thing to emphasize here, you can see, is done in sequence. And it takes usually, it can span between 10 to 15 years ordinarily. So what I'm talking about is this. In the first step is discovery and target identification or validation. And then you do the preclinical stage. And once you get to that and you have something that is potentially ready for investigation or further investigation, you then move to translational area, because there's something now that is possible. And at that stage, you need to manufacture in certain quantities for further investigations, identify initial processes and formulation analytics. And then you develop assays as well. For COVID-19, for example, you have to develop your neutralization assay, which is a bit tricky, but so it takes time to get it right. And then once you've got to that stage, then you do these phases of trials. Phase 1 is basically safety, but you can also demonstrate some immune responses. And if you're happy with that, you then go on to phase 2, where you select how many doses is it that you're going to use that will produce the number of the level of immune response that you think might be protective and what have you. And that for that you use about 100 samples, where you give half of those the product, half a placebo or control, that you can investigate the difference. And once you're happy with that, stepwisely again, you move to the to large efficacy trial that can take 30,000, 40,000 individuals. Again, consistently reporting that vaccine is safe and it is efficacious. And at that stage, then the regulators are aimed to look at all your data, what they call dossier, of all the data that you've been accumulating over time, to be sure that this is now ready for introduction to the general population. What we have learned during the pandemic is that that period that takes 10 to 15 years can be shortened to less than 2 years. In fact, people are saying that you probably can do it now in six months to 2 years. I just say, though, that there will be previous work, all those preliminary studies, exploratory studies that must have been done before then. But what the important thing to emphasize here actually is that instead of doing things in sequence, what has happened actually is that because there's collaboration by investigators and various stakeholders, including funders, people to take the risk to say you can begin to manufacture a vaccine that may not work, which industry will not normally do, because we're going to pay for that. But so you can collapse, you can actually do some of these activities in parallel instead of in sequence, is what has enabled us to get to that. One other thing quickly to talk about the difference now in the trial design is that you can see that if you look at the top of my slide, is the normal that I've described, traditional trial design. So you do your design, you do the recruitment, you do the trial, you do the analysis, and you discover the efficacy. But recently now they are now talking about adaptive design, where you can actually do some, after design, recruitment, trial, on the way before analysis, you can do an interim analysis. So it gives you flexibility that you can actually modify your trial design to achieve the given result because of new information and new ideas that might be useful in arriving at a good outcome. So, but in addition to those clinical the parameters that I've described in terms of trial, there are other things that are involved in vaccine production that includes the scheduling, how many doses? How do you space them? With clinicians that are familiar with vaccination procedure, you know that some is 1 dose, some is 2 doses, some you give them in between 1 month interval and whatever you. What about route of administration? Is it oral? Is it intradermal? Is it, I mean, should we be actually thinking in our own setting, even when we are trying to develop vaccine candidates, how we are going to deliver them? Because sometimes in part of Africa, maybe some parts of Nigeria, even getting syringes to deliver the vaccine is a problem. So can we be thinking, pragmatically, even when we are actually in the process of developing and producing vaccine, even how to deliver? What about how to store? Where you have issues with energy and cold chain, freezing, heating, volume, flexible presentation. What about ease of manufacturing itself and quality control? How can we make it cheap? I mean, what amount of money would you be prepared to pay for a vaccine? What about the cost and health economics? We talk about the cost of the vaccine. What about cost of disease? If we don't vaccinate, I mean, should we be looking at both and compare them? What about social political engagement, making people aware that it's ongoing to avoid the problem of hesitancy, so suddenly throwing a vaccine at them when they don't think actually that they need it. So we need to bring people along. So, and that brings me to the manufacturing itself. So once you have done the research and the trials and whatever, what are the factors that you need to consider when manufacturing vaccines? Manufacturing of vaccines is a complex operation. And you have to constantly be thinking about how can you make it easy and cheap if possible. And the quality controls that you need to apply all along to make sure that the product is safe. You have to think about safety all the time, and that will still retain effectiveness. So are there cheap and easy way to manufacture in terms of using existing facilities or with minimal lead time? What about getting consistent batches concerning the yield and the quality? What about easy technology transfer and the process that we need to do that if we want to scale up? All these could constitute challenges if they're not thought through carefully, even at the early stages of vaccine production. And this is just to say that it may differ from one product to other, depending on its complexity. I mean, if you're looking at, say, oral polio vaccine, for example, a live attenuated virus, to pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, where you have it's like several vaccines. There's a 10 billion vaccine, a 13 billion vaccine, a 15 billion vaccine. And it just means that each one of those variants is a serotype that can constitute a vaccine on its own. So it's like make many vaccines in one vaccine. So the complexity will also influence the level of what complexity that will be required in terms of production. So what are the drivers then of manufacturing strategy? What are the things that we need to consider? What are plant design elements? There is no one fit approach specific. There is no one fits all approach. Specific products may require specific designs, and that is cost implication. What about the technology platform? Are there one easier than the other in terms of what is required to produce the vaccine? What are packaging format? Is it going to be single or multi-dose vials? Is one cheaper than the other? What about supply chain, and which is particular relevance to us in Africa and in Nigeria? Availability and logistics of required materials that you will need to put together to manufacture the vaccine. Because if you have to import everything, for example, is what I'm thinking about that you need, that may affect production cost and competitive advantage. Remember, about 70% of the vaccine that is in use in Africa now is actually produced in India. Because they find a way of producing the vaccine at a cheaper cost of production if you compare that with international global companies. So we have to start thinking also that when producing vaccine here, are we going to be able to be competitive in our production to ensure its long-term sustainability? What's important also is the last thing about advanced market commitment. Manufacturers like to know that this is the quantity of vaccine that will be required in the next 5 to 10 years, or at least 5 years somehow, to give them a leg room to think about how much do they need to invest there in terms of the volume that will be required, because that may also actually affect costs and at the long run. And so that brings me now to the manufacturing, the manufacturing stage and the regulatory review and what is involved. So this is the evaluation of the product and manufacturing facility by the National Regulatory Authority. A manufacturer must comply with all requirements of its National Regulatory Authority. Remember all the time, vaccines usually are given to healthy people. So there's no room for error, as it were. So they need routine monitoring of adverse events, data, annual reports of specific manufacturing information, such as data trains, change management, stability review, critical investigations of any process failure or unexpected trends, routine and unannounced regulatory inspections to review conformance with current the good manufacturing practice, and maintenance of facilities, manufacturing and quality systems, and performance of the process. In some instances, like we do in Nigeria, where the vaccine has to be bought by global organizations like UNICEF, they also, in addition to the National Regulatory Authority approval, require WHO pre-qualification, again, a secondary, if you like, approval, to say it meets the international required standards to be distributed across the nations. So once the approval is done and vaccine is manufactured and has obtained the regulatory approval, but there's still also in the life cycle of the vaccine, post-authorization surveillance. And these are ongoing studies of vaccine continue after the vaccine has been authorized for use. These studies aim to assess real-world effectiveness and to detect any real adverse effects. This is necessary to ensure that the effect in real-life administration is similar to the pre-licensure trials outcomes, because there could be changes for various reasons. Potential variability in preparation of the vaccine, as vaccines will come from different batches. Possible variability in stability and storage, such as the cold chain, which may not be as rigidly maintained in practice as it was in clinical trial. And use of the vaccines in different groups than in pre-licensure studies, such as in people with underlying medical conditions who would not necessarily have been included in the pre-licensure clinical trial. So it goes on. It goes on with the vaccine. They never stop monitoring that the vaccine, the product is safe and that is still effective. So having listened to this process and the challenges that might be involved in producing vaccine at local level, or say in our country, Nigeria. So how can we turn those challenges to opportunities? I think is what we should be discussing. That there are challenges, there's no doubt. And I have a long list here. Infrastructure, from what I've been talking about now. Infrastructure, workforce, clinical research, regulatory capacity, lack of modern technology, poor electric power base, poor policy implementation by government, reliance on imports, costs. Who's going to take the risk of investment loss? There were the US government, for example, was ready to pay billions of dollars ahead of whether or not there would be a COVID vaccine that was efficacious. So who's willing to do that? What about security issue? If we have to be dependent on vaccines that are manufactured from other countries, or even maybe within country, but one company, and something happens and they're not able to produce, or the priority is different. And then of course, the issue of competitive disadvantage that I mentioned, if we have to on a long-term sustainable vaccine-based industry here, we have to have a way of reducing the cost somehow so that we can be competitive. So this is, I want to summarize what I've been talking about in terms of, maybe we bring out what the issues are. So if you look at the 10 years of R&D for each successful vaccine, that's what it takes. Although I've mentioned that in a pandemic, you can actually collapse it. But the collapse actually leads to emergency use authorization, not actually a real approval, because they're still waiting to collect the data that is sufficiently robust to give approval to the vaccine. And it takes 12 to 18 months for first regulatory approval, 24 months to manufacture. And look and listen to this, 70% of production dedicated to quality control. Well, that's really big. And that again points to the effort that you have to make into making sure that what the product is safe. And 6% probability of market entry from preclinical. Look at the success rate, it's very low. And then the cost. It's got, from this estimate, it's 374 million British pounds to 1.5 billion cost of development, depending on the complexity that I mentioned earlier on. That's for the cost of development in terms of preclinical and clinical trials. But then to build the facility itself to the CGMP level, you need another 485 million pounds as cost of building a biological manufacturing site that will be up to the standard. Well, and then I ask a question here: where there is a will, there is a way. Well, none of the challenges as I've just enumerated is unsurmountable. If we want to do it, we can. Why can Nigeria not make vaccine to vaccinate Nigeria? That's the question we should be asking. If we don't, who's going to do it for us? And we have learned from COVID-19, I mean, that if this disease was more devastating than what we had here, it would be another story altogether. So what lessons have we learned? So what is required actually is a realistic approach and commitment at every level if you want to achieve that goal. So I want to look in the few slides left, I want to look at then the moving forward. I'm excited that Nigeria is now actually taking this seriously. Well, maybe COVID-19 has stimulated that. But in 2021, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, through the Federal Ministry of Health, actually published for the first time Nigeria vaccine policy. It is. I'm not going to go into the details here. I'm sure some of you have seen it, but it is detailed, it's comprehensive. It has about 14 sections, and it goes through all the gamut of what I've been talking about since morning, from discovery to preclinical study to clinical studies to manufacturing and even to delivery. Because I was so delighted to see what they have put together here. But as usual with us in Nigeria, I think from my little experience talking to people in the ministry sometimes, policy is not our issue. Policy development is not our issue. And implementation of the policy probably is the issue. And what can we do to avoid that here? Because this is a matter of life and death, as it were. It also has an important element that I find of interest. There's a monitoring and evaluation data section that actually shows you the governance and who is doing what at what, from the top to even health facility and local government levels, and how data sharing will be happening so that they can at one point or the other monitor who is doing what, who has not done what, to make sure that what they aim to achieve will be achieved. There's also political will. And I came about this interesting statement by our president. Only a people's vaccine I can't see that. I can't see what I wrote there. And solidarity at its core can protect all of humanity and get our society safely running again. A bold international agreement cannot wait. We need bold international agreement, but we also need homegrown effort to meet with that. The international agreement is probably happening now through WHO, as you probably are aware of this announcement, that 6 countries, including Nigeria, now will be the first technology recipients of messenger RNA vaccine hub with strong support from African and European partners. The idea is to use mRNA per platform to produce COVID-19 vaccine. But can we also learn from that to see whether we can use that platform in the production of other vaccines as well, particularly that have been that are of immense importance and are not happening, like vaccine against malaria, for example. Well, so the good news is that Nigeria actually is moving in the right direction. There is a joint venture between federal government of Nigeria and me and Baker with equity that is shown here, 49% and 51% respectively. And the idea is that they will work at bringing back to life, as it were, the production of vaccines. Where they will start and what they will do is not clear to me yet. I'm sure it's probably clear to people that are involved. I mean, or maybe a combination of maybe going into manufacturing now. There are different types of takes, if you like, that you can do with regard to that in terms of fill and finish. But we have to be careful what we want to do so that we just don't end up with just packaging instead of actually doing the right thing. So finally, I want to talk about where I sit now at the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research. We actually have a vaccine R&D strategy that is personally driven by the DG, Professor Salako, who keeps asking all the time, why can we not produce vaccine to vaccinate Nigeria? He's very passionate about it. And it's giving the group a team of young, bright Nigerians who are working on this, using a technique of cloning and expression of viral proteins for vaccine development. They are using COVID-19 because of the current situation as the platform to do that. But they also want to look at other products like, that's for which vaccine is lacking at the moment, like Lassa fever. And what would they need in strengthening R&D for sustainable vaccine manufacturing? We ensure improved access to research materials, life science and institutions and facilities, continuous improvement of research and health technology infrastructure, enhance capacity building for skilled workforce in vaccine design and development, create and implement CGMP microscale modular hubs in research centers and academic vaccine laboratories. Currently, they're conducting research into using cutting-edge tools to generate data for vaccine design and development. And they're also collaborating, which is very nice, interesting, with other vaccine research groups across other research institutions in Nigeria and academic institutions as well, to develop innovative vaccine templates, particularly for COVID-19 and Lassa fever, but that could be extended to other areas. And recently, they completed a new clinical observational research facility on site in the Institute for Clinical Trials. Because that's one advantage that Nigeria has because of our population and the disease, unfortunately, that this is a place where you can get results for clinical trials within a short period if we are focused on it. But we have to develop the environment that is suitable for that. And the requirement for that would include international support for improved access to technology transfer for local development of vaccines, need for attractive incentives to reduce the current brain drain in African institutions, and increase support for vaccine and biologics research funding in African institutions, including Nigeria. I think I'm almost getting to the end of it, but I came about this portable quote recently, and probably some of you have seen it as well. Something is wrong when vaccine manufacturing is almost completely absent from an entire continent. Remember, we consume 25% of what is produced, and we produce only 1%. Well, something is wrong with that, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, it is an embarrassment that that's where we're at. But Nigeria is trying to change that trajectory by the development of this Nigeria Vaccine Policy 2021. Actually, was launched, was published September 2021, as you can see. But then I noted here, implementation, it will be the key. Are we going to get to the goal? are we going to have a different attitude towards it, that is something that we must do in life and death? So the outcome of it, actually, whether we are serious or not about this, will be dependent on the level of commitment we have to the implementation of the vaccine policy that's been so well developed. And I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you, sir. That's the end of my lecture.
Thank you very much, Professor Adegbola. Thank you for this remarkably competent presentation. I'm quite impressed, not just by the contents of your lecture, but also by the fact that you kept to time almost to the minute. I've attended many international conferences where presenters from Nigeria were cut off halfway before they had started presenting their main data. So I hope that all of us, 96 of us currently in attendance, will take note of this and take a lesson from this, particularly when we go out to present papers abroad. Thank you very much, Professor Adegbola. I think we have time for a few questions. I'm afraid we cannot afford more than 3. So if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. And after asking the question, please write it down in the message portal so that Professor Adegbola will get you properly and then respond appropriately. So any questions? Professor Adewale? Honorable Minister of Health, Emeritus.
Thank you so much, Professor Adegbola, for that brilliant delivery. It cannot be other than that. And I'm so happy. And I'm also relieved that Professor Tomori has shown up. I've been actually watching out for Professor Tomori, and I'm happy he's here. He has more to tell us about why we stopped in 1990. But some of us who actually have some insight into the file could recollect that in 1990 it was stopped on a very genuine and patriotic reason. And that was because, we wanted to upgrade the facility, we wanted to modernize it. And so they closed the lab. But unfortunately, nothing happened since then until we went through the file and decided to pick up from where we stopped some years back. There has been several unsuccessful attempts to resuscitate vaccine production. And the last one is the one now being chaired by Professor Tomori, who is the chairman of the Bio-Vaccines Limited, where Nigeria is a co-holder. And we're using the facility in Yaba as our collateral for this enterprise. But then we faced a lot of opposition, largely because people are patriotic, largely because they make money by importing substandard and sometimes fake products from outside the country. But a major problem is the fact that we are getting vaccines at subsidized rate through Gavi.
Yes.
That has made production to be uneconomical.
Yes.
But then, whether we like it or not, that concession will end in 2028. So whether we like it or not, by 2018-28, Nigeria will have to pay for the cost of the vaccine. So we better start. So thank you once again. I will stop at that, and I'm sure Professor Tomori will be able to fill in some of the gaps. He is currently driving the local effort.
Thank you, Professor Adewale. I'm afraid people should spend no more than 1 minute, please, asking their questions or making comments. There's somebody who identifies himself as number 2, which I think is Professor Tomori. If I'm right,
no, my name is...
Go on, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Richard, for that wonderful presentation. I wouldn't say much more than say that it's been years of obstacles, but it's people like Richard and Salako that will make this possible. I'm positive we'll make it, And in fact, even today, I'd called Tunde and a few other people of the need to get research and development center. Richard, you're not left out, so you're going to be part of the team. We're getting a team together, particularly with information. I mean, the selection of Nigeria as one of the 6 spokes. I think with anyway, I thought this is not the opportunity to tell you stories about what happened, but I just want to give assurance that with people like Richard, with people like Babatunde and our colleagues, we're going to turn this country around and make vaccine at the right time. Some of the points you raised about cost effectiveness, we have to take into consideration there are many, many advantages of making vaccine locally. And so even if the price is a little higher than outside, remember you're making your vaccine. You're not setting out foreign exchange to go and buy them. You're creating jobs for your people. Government is taking tax out of it. So when you add all together, even if it's $1 higher, in the long run, Nigeria will be better off with producing vaccine. Let me just stop there, but I'm sure that they're putting
Stephen Obaro will be the last one. 1 minute, please. Stephen, go on. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Right. Sorry, I am actually calling in. I'm sort of viewing in from the US. Congratulations, excellent presentation, Richard. And I just have a quick question. Do you know what informed the choice of partnering with May and Baker, which to my mind doesn't have a track record for manufacturing vaccines?
Thank you very much, Stephen.
I'm going to pass that on to Professor Tomari.
3 questions or comments. Can you respond to them, please? Richard.
Okay. Let me, sorry.
I'm passing that on to Professor Tomari.
You couldn't get a better, of the blind men in Nigeria, me and Baker was the only one-eyed company that could do it. And that's why we went for it. The rest are totally blind and deaf. So that was the best choice Nigeria had. Not only are they that, they produce vaccines. I mean, not vaccines. They produce different things before, but they've been agents for other vaccine production companies long time ago in this country. No other company has the capacity at that time. So you make do with what you have in your country. We couldn't get an external person to come and do that for us if it's going to be local vaccine production. Over.
We can speak more about that tomorrow later. Richard, can you answer the rest of the questions or speak to them?
Where are the questions?
In the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at, I was listening to the answers. I would like to thank Professor Tomari and the Honorable Minister. I've been privileged to know them for a long while and to work with them at some instances. And so thank you so much for listening in, for your contributions so far. So the questions, most of them are comments.
Yeah.
I can't find any questions.
Yes, there are comments actually. So
yeah, I can't find.
Do you want to add to them or clarify some of them?
Thank you so much. There's no. Thank you. God is now in the court of Nigeria. There's no. I can't find any. Sorry, Chair. If you see them, please ask. I can't find.
Okay. In that case, may I use my privilege as the chair to revert to Professor Isaac Adewale on one of his comments. He said the reason that the production of vaccines was stopped was that people in power were more interested in themselves, as it were, than in the country. Is that correct, Professor Adewale? Because if so, I'm surprised. You haven't been the Honorable Minister of Health. What did you do to reverse it?
I was the one who negotiated the agreement with BioVaccines and appointed Professor Tomari as the chair.
Thank you very much.
The effort. And I also renegotiated with Gavi for agreement to end in 2028.
Thank you very much.
There was a word missing in the people in power. Should have been new people in power. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't, I'm afraid.
No, when I said new, that would have to be new after Isaac Adewale.
You have
new people in power.
You have been with government since 1999.
No, I didn't join until 2005.
But I remember appointing you the chairman of the polio certification committee when I was chairman of the NPI.
Yeah, but that's not the vaccine production. That's polio eradication, and by the grace of God, we succeeded in doing that. But you're talking of vaccine production. These are two different things.
All right.
There's a question, sir. Great President, with candidate vaccine precursor device, what should inform Nigeria's choice and any implication for ambition vaccine uptake? Oh, that's a good question, actually, and I'm happy again that Professor Tomari is here. So the question is, how do we prioritize the vaccine to manufacture? That's my summary of this question. It says the candidate vaccine precursor diversity, what should inform Nigeria's choice in manufacturing and any implications for envisioned vaccine uptake? I think that's a good question. And when I was preparing this, I was actually thinking about that because there's a lot of work to be done because I think there's confusion going on about equating manufacturing to vaccine production. They're different things. Manufacturing is a process or one of the steps, as it were, in the process of vaccine production. And what determines is there a prioritization list or the vaccine to be produced in Nigeria? I'm sorry, that's why I said I'm going back to Professor Tomari.
Sure, there is. I mean, you heard what the Honorable Minister said about the fact that we're depending on Gavi, and Gavi was going to go off, and we have to take care of ourselves after Gavi goes off. And so the business plan of the vaccine was based on that national plan that we're not going to depend on Gavi anymore. So what was Gavi supplying us? That would be the priority of our production.
So, Prof, I think the question then is, we cannot start with 11 vaccines for production. So there has to be some prioritization of even amongst those, which one are we capable of starting with?
Those are business secrets and plans, which I can't reveal at this point.
All right, okay.
Gentlemen, we cannot turn this into a two-way discussion. And time is nearly up, or very much nearly up. We have 2 minutes left. So I may use my to ask Professor Lami Lambert to ask a question or make a comment.
And then I will come down and join you.
Professor Lambert was the Director General of the National Institute for Veterinary Research, INVORM. So I think it is fair to let her make a comment or ask a question.
Yes.
Professor Lambert, can you unmute? I'm sure you are there because you have just raised your hand.
Can you hear me?
Lambert? I can hear someone. I don't know who it is. It's Lami. Go on.
She is.
Lami, we can hear you. You can go on.
No, she's gone.
Can you unmute, Lami?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. the problem is with the equipment and validation of the equipment when you go into production. And that had been the major problem we had in VOM. Now, is there any way that importation will be made a lot easier for these new things that are coming up for us to produce and sustain production in Nigeria? Possibly I'll ask Wale. After,
no, you can only ask the chair.
Okay, I'll ask the chair. After May and Baker exit, would we still have equipment that are validated to produce and to manufacture?
Professor Tomari.
Richard, I think you're the one who gave the lecture, not me. Why is everyone? Okay, let me quickly.
I can actually attempt to answer that. That is the job of the regulators. That is the job. That is the job of the regulatory authority. They need to validate your manufacturing process. They not only validate manufacturing process, but actually equipment and everything. You submit a dossier to them that covers all areas of vaccine manufacturing for them to validate before they give approval.
Yeah, can I quickly make a comment?
Yes,
we're working together with NAFDAC right from onset.
Okay.
In the issue of vaccine, the equipment and all that, even the building construction. NAFDAC has been with us at our meetings on a regular basis. Secondly, the funding we're getting is not going to be National Assembly only. We're also looking for funding from outside. Through IFC, World Bank, African Exim Bank, and also the African Development Bank. So the issue of importation and problem may not be a problem with us because we are very close to agreement with the World Bank and also the African Exim Bank and also the African Development Bank. So those will be channeled, whatever funds we get there will be channeled towards purchasing those equipment that we don't have in the country. So we've seen the experience of the past. And the 1924 that you started and the problems you had in VOM. So we're learning from that past experience.
We're going to have to stop in a few minutes, but in the meantime, may I ask whether Professor Tomari, what role Professor Tomari is playing in this affair with May and Becker?
What role am I playing?
For the purpose of reassurance.
Oh, okay. First of all,
if you are involved.
Yeah, I chaired the board. And the reason, I chaired the board of the BAO vaccine, which I think in a way it's a good thing because the federal government is a minority shareholder, and which I represent. But I think the important thing for me is the fact that we have people like Richard around. We have our colleagues at the NIMR and the kind of things they're doing. And that's why I have so much confidence and hope. If we can scale through all of the, the issues they talk about, I don't want to talk about the House Assembly and all the national whatever. But once we get over that problem, which we are very close to, because we actually moved the matter up to the presidency when there was a lot of blockage from within the National Assembly. So I think we're close to finally getting all that. Or their actions stalled the progress we have made with World Bank. But I'm looking forward to that now that the World WHO has appointed us. And let me also tell one little comment about the selection of Nigeria for this World WHO thing was not based on our population or the performance of our government. We were specifically invited. BAO vaccine was interviewed. We filled the forms. We completed all the data, and it was on the strength of that Nigeria was chosen. And so it was NAFDAC that participated, brought us in. So we are working together. Of course, there was the usual diplomatic junketing, but the real thing was not because we knew before that announcement a week ago that Nigeria had been chosen, but it was what we call a confidential decision. So that's why we kept quiet. Otherwise, we would have been the one to announce it, not WHO.
Thank you very much, Professor Thomas. I am very, very reassured, as I think most Nigerians will be. I'm afraid we have to come to a close. And in this regard, may I ask the Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Medicine, Professor Adegbola, to give the vote of thanks and declare the webinar closed. Professor Adegbola, are you there? Professor Adegbola. Professor Adegbola, are you there?
Thank you very much, sir.
Maybe if Professor Adegbola is not here, you can take over the mantle. And in this regard, I ask the Secretary of the Nigerian Academy, Professor Adegbola, to give the vote and declare the webinar closed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We promised people that this webinar will not be more than. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
We promised that this webinar will not be more than 1.5 hours.
1 hour, we said.
Thank you, sir. I think the only thing is to end this. As we promised people, it will not be more than 1 hour plus, less than 1.5 hours. And we have done that. So we can end this webinar. Thanking all that participated, including the
I think we have lost
Thank
him.
you.
And,
Can you hear me? I was just thanking you.
Oh.
we cannot hear you.
You did not get my thanks?
No.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. We have kept to the time, less than 1.5 hours. So we end this webinar now, thanking all that participated. God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was a great webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for turning up. The attendance was quite good. Nearly 100 people attended the webinar. So that's a reflection of you, Richard, I suppose. Thank you very much.
And you as the chair, sir.
Thank you very much.
You as the chair.
For attending this webinar, which is most important and most relevant and timely.
Thank you, sir.
Of COVID-19. Thank you very much. Wish everyone of us.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And God bless.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.